greenery of the mangroves I planted around the cavern and the wheat seeds gathered from the moss gardens that were now growing in the crop house were in stark contrast to the Amethyst cave. Although, when I took a deep breath and dived below, I found it to be a tiny hollow, a secret hidden within the earth that was now mine to keep too. Once I'd picked up some of the amethyst crystal, Nellie sprung to life, and soon after I was holding a spyglass. I wondered sometimes if Nellie wasn't learning these things, but remembering them. She picked things up quicker than the first mangrove tree had sprouted. I had to choose carefully which tools to bring out into the cavern. Well, not too carefully. I probably reserved far too much of my carrying space on tools, but I like to be prepared. With preparation in mind, I told Twobone to stay in the safety of moss type once again. He was prone to falling down the sharp drops. In fact, Twobone was struggling to demonstrate his survival instinct altogether. Dreiton was finding difficulty navigating the numerous flooded caverns that adjoined our own. The only animal that seemed to be at home here was Bova. I had collected stacks of ores, and the single furnace in the basement wasn't cutting it. My lost magic had replenished whilst harvesting minerals from the rich cavern, which was now supplemented by the magic released from the freshly smelted metals. With the furnaces raging, coal was the limiting factor. The cavern branched off in almost every direction, and I'd turned around if I found myself wandering any one way for too long. The exception would be the seemingly bottomless pit where Mostite's moat drained. It felt like a grim presence lurked below, but curiosity was gripping me. The basement stores were beginning to overflow, so I started expanding. After running out of junglewood, I couldn't wait any longer. Instead of heading up to the surface to gather more wood, I tentatively lowered myself down the waterfall into the pit. But I slipped and fell in, veering mid-air to narrowly land in the water. I saw even deeper below. The rock of the cave made way for something else. A wall of luminescent... was it rock? Whatever it was, it crumbled as I tried to gather it. The same went for the eerie objects that seemed to detect our movement. Dreiton wasn't afraid, but I was. Further ahead were more strange contraptions. These ones screeched and seemed to drain the light from the air. In the dark, I walked up to get a closer look, but my presence had awoken something. The sound of the thing's movements boomed through the passages, and before I ran, I got a glimpse of its open chest, a twisted heart beating within. My torch-placing rules were no good in Mostite's open cavern, and I'd forgotten to start using them again in the deep dark passages, so instead I panicked and fled blind. Steeling myself, and also leaving Dreiton behind with Twobone, I went back down. This time systematically, scouring the cave for more resources. and for the first time I struck diamond. The discovery had temporarily blinded me to the adjoining chamber, even bigger than the cavern moss type resided in. I looked in awe, until I noticed a set of piercing purple eyes staring at me. From this distance, I couldn't be sure if I made eye contact or not, and the forced vision was clouding my perception. The Enderman hadn't looked away. Was it the one that guests had warned me about? And suddenly, they were gone. I was shaken, but continued downwards. I was where I'd seen the hulking monster. It seemed to have left, but with the magic darkness I couldn't be sure. I tried to sneak past the contraptions I now recognised as similar to the calibrated skulk sensor recipe Nellie had taught me when I'd picked up the Amethyst. However, I wasn't nimble enough, and each time I tripped one, the other skulk device screeched, warning its guardian, its warden. After the fourth screech, I heard the rumbling again, and watched as the hulk awoke. It sniffed the air. It was blind. Was I safe? My heart beat quicker. So did the monsters. Run, Nellie! Behind me, the monster's footsteps rumbled and its roars followed me. Luckily, I had already replaced the torches to mark the way out. I sprinted through the twisting tunnels until I reached the waterfall that seemed to take an age to climb. I made it. I wasn't even thinking as I extended the outpost. I was still reeling from my encounter with the warden and mindlessly mining out the basement for cobblestone to build up the modest tower was carving. After the warden chased me out of the lower levels of Moss Tide's caves, I returned all the way to the surface, where I pulled out a fresh map to colour in. That's when I came across the outpost I was now working on. Just like when I'd started, it was a beacon and a rest stop, only now a little bigger. After a few nights in the hills, I finished exploring the small map, which had led me to the Grumpy Village. In the Grumpy Village, I planted a proper watermelon patch. I was always pinching the fruits, with Brannis's permission, and now there were far more to pinch. The gratitude that the villagers had for such building projects generally gained me a solid reputation, and even newcomers tolerated what they perceived as my bizarre behaviour. I visited the forge to tell the triplet smiths about my adventures into the deep dark. I wanted to get it off my chest. The triplets exchanged looks whilst listening to my story, and when I was done, Brannis warned me about that grim place, then told me why, but wouldn't have done were it not for the relationship I had fostered with them. For Brannis told me one of their deepest secrets. Their family, the heirs of the Long Shatter's Royal Warriors Guild of the Sky Kingdom, were left with a single task after the last war: to defend that which slumbered below Welcome Peak. Were it to stir, they would surely not be able to hold back the tides of monsters. Be careful, be bold. I took what Brannis had said seriously, especially considering what I had discovered deep underground. but that didn't mean I was ready to move on just yet. Whilst gathering more jungle wood for Mosstite's warehouse roof, I encountered a roaming wolf. She was in the middle of a hunt, and I saw Two Bones' tail wag furiously as he watched. I had plenty of bone on me for the saplings, and it only took one to convince her to join the clan. Muttony's eyes were as sharp as her wits, that were as sharp as her teeth. After Two Bone had to wait in Mosstite's hall, he had been extra energetic, and a bit of like-minded company was exactly what he needed. Although the two certainly had their differences, aside from their wits. It looked like Two Bone's eagerness was not as charming as he thought it was. Two Bone wasn't the only one to receive some extra company after our outing, as I returned to Mosstite's farm with 3 chickens to live alongside Bova. Decided that I wasn't going back into the deep dark, at least for now. It was fraught with danger that I wasn't yet prepared for, and if what Abranas, Fergus and Georges had said was true, then I could risk unleashing horror on all the villagers living in the savannah above. When I learnt more about the darkness that lurked below, I'd come back, and when I did, I'd come back to the croaking of the frogs in Mosstite's gardens and the gentle splashing of the fish in the moat. Until then, Mosstite's own wardens would keep the place safe and tidy. The caverns of Mosstite and what I had explored deeper below had rewarded me with a bounty of gems and minerals. Dizzy's pack was overflowing when we headed back to Fool's Landing. I wonder how Fish, Seville, Enin, the cows, Akelzar and the other skeleton horses would react when they met Muttony. The furnaces of the forge were burning day and night to smelt through the copper from Mosstite's cavern and caves. It was time to utilise the richness of the mountains around my home to fuel the fires. I brought Muttony out with Seville, leaving the boys in the bunker, but as night turned, I sought the help of Two Bone as well. It seems I had underestimated Two Bone's charms, as before the night was through, there was one more wolf running around. Leaving the new mother with her pup, I pulled Enin along too and headed to the gravelly cliff. There, I roamed Horsepaw Prominence by day and fished at the cliff by night, aided by my new clock made from the gold I'd found at Mosstite. I knew there was plenty of coal and iron in the mountains, but even then the amount I found surprised me. I was based at Gravelly Cliff for days, and in turn provided it with a well-needed bit of refurbishment. The animals were enjoying their own time, lounging about in the boathouse as they had done when those three had met. On one of my trips back home to drop off coal and iron, I brought Dreiton and the adolescent wolf out, the young guns, leaving the others in the bunker. I still had to contend with the locals at the gravelly cliff, apparently quite angry that I'd been pinching their things. I didn't really consider it stealing. I had been careful at Gravelly Cliff, not looking for trouble unless the trouble found me, but the profitable surface mining and calming fishing had lulled me into a trance. So, when I spotted a group of pillagers, assumed all would be well and rashly decided to proactively defend the grumpy village nearby. By attacking them from the significant low ground. It was too little too late when I woke up and took the situation seriously, a side effect of being apparently undying. In my absence, the last witness was thwarted by the young wolf, who was both parts surprised and joyful to see me back collecting my things, and I was glad to see him. When I fell this time, I really felt the magic rip away from me. It was almost like the forge had a mind of its own as it gobbled up the coal. In the meantime, I was busy expanding things at home, all the while getting an itch to build something bigger. I was starting to accrue quite the selection of adventurer's gear. I hope it didn't bring any unwanted attention. The cats ran about with me as I planted another grove of oak, this time on the outskirts of the dirty slopes. Seville and Dreiton played, whilst Enin mainly watched and skulked around. When it came to working on the mine, I ventured down alone. The purpose of the mine was threefold. I wanted to have controlled access to deep underground, where the precious and less precious minerals could be found. I wanted an easy way to accrue cobblestone if I needed it, despite already having an overflowing double chest of the stuff. And I wanted a safe way down into the chasm of Fool's Landing. It was time for the wolf family to keep me safe as I illuminated every crevice and gathered the gifts of the cave too. cave system didn't branch far. So, once I'd covered all of it, it now felt like home. Quite the expansion. I wondered what I could do with all this. It could be a hub for all sorts of things. Plenty of space for people to live and work. That is, if there was anyone who wanted to stay here. I still struggled to get more than a few visitors. At least I now had a way up and down from the sea to my home above. And I couldn't forget the new addition to our family. This space is theirs too. Wolfgang was brazen and bold like his father, but sharp like his mother. There was always something to do around the homestead. Today, I was moulding the east edge of the plateau behind the farmhouse into stairs to the crop patch, but that didn't take me long. I also chopped down the little jungle tree there and replaced it with an oak sapling. Next, I harvested the fully grown crops. The produce in the crop patch that fell into the water flowed down into the farmhouse, next to Fish's pool. She and Shudder made sure no unwanted monsters snuck in through the metal grate. I had smelted most of the copper I'd stored, and still had ample coal left from that I gathered across the surface of my plateau and Horsepaw prominence. So I moved on to smoothing my stacks of cobblestone in the forge's furnaces. Perhaps I should have built more furnaces to get the job over and done with, but there was something cosy about having the fires burning day and night. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with all the copper I had, so for the time being I stored the copper blocks downstairs in the corridor leading from the cartography suite. And then I got back on with things. Next was checking to see if the wheat in the crop tower was fully grown. And it was. My big plans to be the greatest baker in the land were at least part way there. I certainly had plenty of wheat, but as I walked through the corridors of my home, I once again pondered the thing I was still missing. Some villagers around here. I went to my enchanting room to enhance a shield. When I last fell, the pillager captain had used an enchanted crossbow that pierced straight through my shield and armour. It was Aquazar that told me to stop wasting my time.
You can't enchant that silly plank of wood. What would you do without me?
I felt bad for feeling lonely now. Shudder, Titan and Fish helped me prepare some of the finest bread the Hoof and Udder could offer. I was to deliver it to the Grumpy village, where I hoped Brannis knew something about enchanting a shield. When I got there, I was greeted by 5 iron golems on the hillside. Perplexed, I went down into their forge. The triplets had been busy, both working on the weapons order for Lushville and bolstering their own defences. With all the new iron golems around, Borg had been promoted to the forge.
Of course you can enchant a shield.
I was surprised and a bit smug to learn that Aquazar was wrong.
Won't work on the enchanting table that you use.
Brannis's ears had pricked up when he found out that I could use an enchanting table, and he happily shared with me the process of enchanting a shield. Even before I had shared the freshly baked loads of bread. If I wanted to enchant a shield myself, I could do so at an anvil. I just need a tome with the right magical runes.
Finding those tomes is the hard bit, laddie.
I shared more of the Hoofanudder's bread with some of the newer villagers too, and received their gratitude. In that same spirit, I straightened out the paths in town. My lack of sleep still hadn't attracted the pull of phantoms yet, so by the morning the villagers of the Grumpy Village woke to their new landscaping. I was ready to go back home and root through the magical tomes I'd fished up at Gravelly Cliff to see if any of them would be suitable enchantments for a shield, but before I could leave, Fergus called me over.
Brannis doesn't tend to listen all that much, but I remember when Georges told us about your enchanting table. He also said how much you wanted to start a little community of your own.
I did not remember saying that. What else had I said that night after Georges and I had drunk the fermented milk?
Well, if you want to be your very own builder-mare, then I'm the one who can help. You see, no one will live anywhere without one of these special bells. But not just anyone can make these. It'll cost you a pretty penny.
I rushed straight back home, thinking that I finally had the answer to my problems, and after emptying the furnaces, cutting the smooth stone into bricks, and refilling the furnaces again, I saw that I had the exact amount of emeralds for the bell from Fergus. Dreiton and Wolfgang helped me clear out a little horde of invading zombies that wanted to eat Dizzy for supper. Then I was back at the Grumpy Village. As brave as the villagers here were, I had seen the numerous monsters out tonight on my way here and rung the revered bell, which I now had a new appreciation for. In the morning, I proudly approached Fergus, who was quite taken aback that I had shown up so soon with 36 emeralds. His tone changed, and I could tell I wasn't going to like this.
Before I sell this, I need something from you.
Fergus had used all the iron intended for Lushville's weapon order on dabbling with the golems, and still hadn't found the courage to tell Brannis. His solution was for me to make the requested number of swords with stone, secretly, but within their own forge, perhaps for some semblance of honouring his deal with Lud from Lushville. Fergus was ever the black sheep of the Grumpy Village, at least in his older brother's eyes, and making these swords for Lushville might have even impressed Brannis. If it was discovered that I'd made them, or that they were substandard, Brannis was unlikely to be best pleased. If it wasn't for the secrecy, I'd be raring to show Brannis my latest work. I'd repaired the infinity bow I'd fished from Gravelly Cliff, and now found that not only was it durable, it was powerful. Another round of smoothing stone, and with Dizzy loaded up with the swords, and my pack loaded with another fresh batch of bread, as well as carrots and potatoes to sell there, we set off for Lushville. Lud and completed Fergus's trade.
What do you call these then?
Understandably, Lud wasn't best pleased with the stone swords, and I explained I was only the courier, as Fergus still wanted to take credit for the weapons. Lud discussed what to do with one of his younger cousins.
Alright, Faux, take the beef back to Fergus, but he's not getting any leather. That said, I don't want to put you out, so you take it.
Put the weapons and my own gift of bread in Lushville's stores, took the payment from the farming community, and then, instead of heading back straight away, I stayed to upgrade the farm's production mechanism. They were clearly making good use of it. I gathered some sand for glass from the pond in the cow pasture and tried out my new bow on the monsters of the night. Products of the shoot currently ended up in the small room in Lushville's ravine. An unsafe trip down, especially if Gibble was the one making it. I'd already had to help him out of the ravine once before, so I was extending the chute up. Anything in the still water would slowly rise to the surface, and I used that to create a path back to Lushville's farmhouse. I hadn't been asked to help, but I wanted to distance myself from Fergus's botched trade in the eyes of the people here. It took me a few days to properly figure out how to make the flowing water go uphill, but I eventually figured it out. There was a few things to optimise in the pre-existing chute. Some of the meat and leather was getting stuck, so I added a second current in the bottom of the chute to push it along. Now, it was time to test the design. I had found that my designs were somewhat flawed. For whatever reason, the wooden block would get stuck in the new current on the first opening of the piston that released the waters of the ravine into the chute. But if I closed that piston, briefly waited, and then opened it again, the force of the main current would push the wooden block along into the still water elevator. I was cautiously optimistic that my test block would find its way back to the farmhouse, but then realised that there was still a need to descend the precarious stairs of the ravine to get down to the lever. Something for another day, I think. Before leaving, I sold the produce I'd bought, and some of the extra carrots I'd farmed in the town, as per our previous arrangement. On the way home, I stopped off in the Grumpy village to drop off the beef and to see Fergus. I told him that upon seeing the stone swords, Lud had rescinded the offer of the extra leather. He'd expected better things of weapons forged from here. Fergus was more than a little despondent, but accepted. I wasn't going to let Fergus rescind on our deal though, but he was happy to take my emeralds. A steep price, but for what I was buying, it was worth it. I didn't mention that the leather promised to Fergus, Lud had actually given to me. Just a nice bonus. I'd only gone to the Grumpy village to see about improving my shield, and I had come back with the knowledge and stuff to start my own village, right here. I didn't know why villagers only lived within the vicinity of one of these bells. What was so special about them? It was just another one of the things that I didn't understand about the people of the savannah. I was different, there was no denying that. But I welcomed the customs of those I'd met, and if this bell is what it takes to start a community here, then so be it. Of the things that was also needed to start a community was living space. And currently, the only place to sleep was the bunker. So, I started working on the bunkhouse. It was difficult to focus on being careful when I was busy bustling around, and the more I had built, the brighter and safer it was. But danger could still be found just around the corner. I must have glanced at the Enderman through the grass, because by the time I saw it, it was already enraged. Business as usual, and business at the moment was still smoothing the cobblestone and cutting it into bricks. That and the other duties of the homestead was keeping me plenty busy. It was a shame that sometimes one job could create two more. Nothing wrong with being lucky sometimes. It's just that the other ingredient for success is preparation. I'm also going to need a lot more wood. Through the efforts of Gloria's pamphlets and Georgis's expeditions, it was expected that more people were going to move to the savannah, At least that's what the optimistic villagers said, and I wanted to be ready. When I'd excavated for the bunkhouse, I found even more iron and coal on the plateau. With all the stone and lumber I had gathered, my stockpiles were looking healthier than ever. It was cathartic to fill the empty chests, knowing that with each swing of my axe or shot of my infinity bow, I'd accrue just a little bit more. And the slow gathering of materials made it all the more satisfying to use those stockpiles up. I had travelled all over the savannah since I'd arrived, and some of the things I'd gathered were stored at one or another of the places I'd stayed. Tonight, I was using the time where it was dangerous to chop wood to instead travel to Copperwater Cave. I'd taken the chest boat, so there was no space to fit one of my furry friends, but company found me. A friendly dolphin escorted me into the dock of the cave. At least it was only half of the creatures out there that wanted to eat me. I was fully in the mindset of resource consolidation. There wasn't too much left at Copperwater Cave, but there was an entire chest of cobblestone. I was going to turn these into stone bricks too. I found the air seemed clearer away from home, and for some reason I felt a sense of relieved burden. I told the dolphin about it on the way home. Aside from a few hiccups, work on the bunkhouse was coming along nicely, even though it was difficult to navigate around the plateau's chasm. The scaffold certainly helped. Despite the peculiar feeling that had been niggling at me, the homestead was pleasantly calm. The thing about my undying was, it still hurt. Partly because Aquazar would berate me each time she sensed a loss of magic. I was using her rudeness as an excuse to ignore her. There was something she wanted to ask me. In truth, I felt sorry for the imprisoned witch. I'd go see her in a bit. But it would have to wait. Muttley had helped me get the infinity bow back from the skeleton. I really ought to be more careful. So it was lazy of me to leave the dank foundations of the bunkhouse unlit. I was acting as brazen as Two-Bone and Wolfgang. That might have something to do with the infinity bow itself. It was a powerful weapon.
finally happened. I had finished smoothing the last of the cobblestone in the furnace and cutting it into bricks. The thing was, for all the cobblestone I had, I'd not saved enough for the bunkhouse. Luckily, my new mine was waiting for me, and with a few adjustments, it was an easy source for more. Been sleeping a lot recently. The plateau chasm was dangerous enough in the day. Perhaps that was why, when I did end up staying up for long enough, I forgot about the phantoms. When they appeared, their grating shrieks didn't pause to constantly remind me of their presence. Duties around the homestead might have slowed me down a bit, but it was the produce I could sell in Lushville that would keep this place afloat, until people found the Hoof and Udder bakery and tavern to be a place they wanted to spend their emeralds. I wondered if there was a farmer I could teach these techniques to. The mechanisms I had implemented were certainly very different to how it worked in Lushville, and they were the premier farmers in the region. At the very least, I'd have to secure this place at some point. Monsters were all too common in the region, but that didn't mean I would put up for it in my town. When people moved in, perhaps it could be someone's job to feed the animals with their favourite foods. At the moment, most of the animals had to sort out feeding themselves with what I left them. I would soon find out how the wolves fed themselves whilst I was gone. In the morning, I would take the wolves out with me to shear wool from sheep for the bunkhouse beds. And tonight, I was accompanied by Seville, Enin and Titan, who warded off the phantoms. The hills of the dirty slopes were bristling with animals, and I easily found more than enough sheep to provide wool for the beds. I got to see the wolves playing together, or at least that's what I thought they were doing. Muttony was teaching Wolfgang how to hunt, and Two-Bone was joining in too. I'm glad they were on my side, but there was little I could do to stop them today as they thinned the herd. It was my turn to hunt when I noticed the group of pillagers close to my home. Last time, I'd gone in head first, but this time would be different. I had the infinity bow. It was the first time I'd seen two groups of pillagers attack in unison. Luckily, I had unknowingly cut off the first group before they reached Fool's Landing, and with the two groups separated, the element of surprise, and the three wolves, the pillagers stood no chance.
In the aftermath of the wolves' feast on the dirty slopes, I had a considerable amount of things I wouldn't normally have gathered. I had an idea of how to use them, but I'd need ink first. After a breezy sail along the cliff face, I found an abundance nearby a gravelly cliff, where I also gathered some sand. These small outings were made all the easier since I'd built the mine shaft as a means to reach the sea from the plateau. I'd have to look for ways to make other trips easier too. I realised the glass panes I'd used in the second mine shaft may not be sturdy enough, so I replaced them with glass blocks. I'd been writing in Nellie's pages since I met her. However, when I did, the writing shortly ebbed away. We'd come a long way together now, and if I needed to, she'd show me what I wrote previously. That said, I didn't want to have to bug her every time, so I spent the night writing out my adventures into leather-bound books, with the gift from Lud. When I wrote them out one by one, I started to realise just how much I'd accomplished since I came here, how many people I'd met, and all the places I'd been. I left the current book half finished in the cartography suite. I'd finish it soon, once I could write about the first, or rather the second resident of Fall's Landing. The rest of the books I put onto the shelves in the enchanting room. It was a welcome break to write down my endeavours after I finished the bunkhouse, but now it was time to place down the bell and wait for someone to move in. Failing that, I'd go and find someone. I quickly checked the enchanted books to see if any of them would work as shield enchantments, like Abranus had said. One looked like it could work, but I didn't use it yet, because Gloria would probably want to translate the artefact. Whilst I was feeling considerate, I should probably see what it was Aquazar wanted.
When you go off on your adventures, I get so lonely. I would ask that you go and fetch my cat Manx to keep me company in this prison.
It was true that the other cats tended to avoid Aquazar. I asked her where Manx was. Aquazar said that Manx was back in her hut, where she'd planned to return after stealing the magic from the enchanting table. She pointed out on my map where her hut was, except where she pointed to was off of my map, far off of my map, to the southeast.
Manx will still be there, waiting for me.
It was ages away, further than any trip I'd made so far, except maybe the one that brought me here in the first place. In the end, Aquazar guilt-tripped me into going, so the bell would have to wait. She insisted I lift the curse the pillager captain had afflicted me with before I go, and I thought it'd be a good idea to stock up on fish for Manx, hoping that he'd like them as much as the other cats did. So it was back to Gravelly Cliff. Good thing I was really into my fishing last time I was here. I grabbed some more sand whilst I was there, and when I was back, started prepping for a long journey. My anvil broke with all the repairs I was making to my better equipment. But even after I replaced it, fixed up the tools and weapons, as well as the enchanted iron armour, I still had plenty of iron left. If I was careful in my journey, I should have what I need to get me there safe. I'd also crafted some maps and a cartography table to work on them along the way. If it was as far as Aquazar said, I might get there all right, but would certainly need the maps not to get lost on the way back. I said goodbye to the wolves and the cats, to Shudder and Fish, to Dizzy, to Poof, and to the skeleton horses. I only brought Two Bone along. I didn't want anyone else to get lost. grumpy village was on my route out of the savannah, so I stayed the night, cooking the beef from Lushville for the villagers. A pseudo feast where I told everyone about my quest to find Aquasar's cat, before a deep sleep, ready to kick off the journey at first light. It was in the jungle where I first walked off my map. The journey so far had been simple, but I was about to venture further than I had before, and excitement gripped me. With a fresh map in hand, I pressed on with my journey. I came across a peculiar forest with dark wood and mushroom trees. Despite seeing countless trees on my trip, the never-ending forest was to the southwest, not the southeast where I was. It was in the dark forest where I made a little hut and stayed the night. Before I continued, I stayed to fell more of the dark trees. I realised it was the same type of tree as the dark oak sapling I had back at home. Now that I saw the trees, it was clear that they only grew with thick trunks. So I chopped until I had 3 more saplings to plant with the one I already had. That took a whole day. Came across a village. The villagers here wore warmer clothes than those in the savannah, but the differences in their customs didn't stop there. I introduced myself and was welcomed. The lively village was bustling, far more so than the 3 villages in the savannah were when I first met them. The people here knew about the savannah and even some of its rich history, but they told me this area was full of other villages. So it used to be that most people left the dangerous savannah alone. It was only recently people started moving back there. Despite their hospitality, I didn't stay, instead opting to march forward, that night needing to make yet another map. It was in a birch forest where I made my final map. I collected a spruce sapling earlier that day, and all in all the adventure was going well. But I was starting to doubt Aquasar's directions. What if I never found her hut? And there it was, in the swamp, just where Aquasar had said. As I stepped down the hill into the swamp, I heard someone else. But when I called out, there was no response. Did Aquasar have a witch friend? I wish he'd warned me. Expecting mischief here, I ignored it and started looking for Manx. Here, Manx, lots of lovely cod. As I approached the hut, I heard a voice.
"You've come to the wrong place."
The hut was empty. I told the voice I was here for Manx, and then I'd be gone.
"So, Akazar sent you. Well, I'm afraid Manx is my cat now."
The voice wasn't Aquazar's friend, it was her enemy. I saw Manx, and ignoring the voice's taunts, I slowly approached. I think Manx was just as wary of the voice as I was. It didn't take much to win Manx's affection when I caught him. The voice didn't like that.
"You will not reunite Manx with that paltry witch Akazar."
Where was it coming from? There was a strange resonance to the voice that made it hard to pinpoint.
"A pity you won't be around to tell Akazar how you failed. Akazar's precious villager friends can't help her now."
Tossed and turned that night following the witch's poison. I couldn't help but think about what the witch had said regarding Aquazar's villager friends. I wonder if it was a village nearby. The one I'd passed was surely too far away. Before setting off, I had a bit of time to get to know Manx. Now that his captor was gone, he was confident and independent. At the top of the hill, I spotted something in the distance. I could see what looked like a village, but even with the spyglass, I couldn't make it out exactly, only that something was wrong. When I got to the village, it was deserted. Spiderwebs covered the buildings, and the untouched cobblestone had been lined with moss. And then I saw a villager. They had been turned into a zombie. Stuck within a deep spiderweb, I felt immense pity for the creature. This must be the village the witch was talking about. Whatever the witch had done here, I couldn't imagine that they deserved it. The village bell was still there. Despite knowing the value of it, I didn't take it, for if I did, I was surely condemning the soul of the village to be forgotten to history. It may have been silly, but leaving the bell felt like this desolate place still had some hope. Nearby on a hill was a collection of cherry blossom trees. The breeze rustled the leaves of the trees and the pink flowers that grew beneath them. I cut down a choice few so I could take some of the saplings back with me. Even the wildlife was peaceful up here. I planted the blue cornflower I picked in the desolate village as a small token for them. The calmness I'd found was broken by a group of pillagers. What were they doing way out here? This was the third group that I'd encountered recently, and I was starting to think that they were hunting me. But how had they found me? I couldn't dwell on that now, because it was already dark, and I was rushing back to the desolate village for somewhere to sleep, hoping that I could sneak past the monsters. With a full inventory, I started the trip back home. With my maps and Two-Bone and Manx to keep me company, the way back was smooth, more or less. Through forests and over hills, we trekked together. Two-Bone and I getting to know Manx as we did. The Black Cat had been waiting for Aquazar, at least before the other witch had got to him, so I was left wondering why he'd followed me now. Perhaps he knew that I was reuniting him with the moody witch, who apparently was more amicable than I thought. I wasn't looking forward to telling her what had come of her village. Then again, I didn't even know what the village meant to her. I only had what the other witch said to go on. Could Aquazar really have been friendly with a group of villagers? She had hardly made the best first impression on me. Before I reached the grumpy village, I found a cow and dispelled the villager curse I was becoming accustomed to. I didn't know exactly what it did, but Aquazar had been adamant that it didn't follow me to her witch's hut. Maybe she didn't want me near her village with it. Either way, the fresh curse dispelled was one less thing to worry about as I approached the steep valleys that lay between me and the outpost. I didn't want to get caught out here at night. I knew that feeling. It was the other Enderman, and Guest was with him. Immediately after the encounter, I was immersed by the peculiar feeling that was nagging me back home, only now it was stronger, far stronger. That night, I was plagued with bad dreams. Saw Welcome Peak, I breathed a sigh of relief. I'd made it back. I could relax, not having to worry that Two-Bone or Manx might get lost in the jungle, or that I'd get caught out in the dark somewhere I didn't know. In the forge, I was greeted warmly by the triplets, who wanted to know about my adventure, so I regaled them about the town I visited, Manx,
the imposter witch and the desolate village that had something to do with the incarcerated Aquazar in Fool's Landing. You must be exhausted. I'll bet you want to go home and rest up. Fergus was right. I was weary. Borg, the hulking column of the forge, watched me go. After I'd put everything away from the adventure, I brought Manx with me to go and see Aquazar. The ethereal witch was waiting for me, but after her initial excitement of seeing her cat, she became reserved and serious. I'd not seen her act like this before. Her tone didn't change until I told her about the other witch that was squatting in her hut, and asked her about the desolate village.
You mean they're all dead? Damn Prologue! She has always hated me, but I never thought that she could. I'm glad for what you did to her. And you brought me Manx. Thank you. It's just that when you were gone, he promised to release me, you see. You need to get out of here. Now.
I didn't know what Aquazar was talking about, but suddenly that peculiar feeling was back.
Oh no! He's here!
As I slowly turned around, the peculiar feeling grew into one of dread. The other Enderman was standing there. I was cornered, and then he looked at me. In the blindness of the unrelenting visions, I desperately looked towards Aquazar for help, but she was gone. The Enderman was clawing at my mind, so I began to fight back. Vision after vision thrust themselves through my consciousness, each one a side effect of the Enderman's failed attempts to corrupt me. I was seeing the fabric of reality warped through the eyes of the beast standing in front of me. As our minds melded in the ongoing battle, the visions I had seen before were becoming clear. The devastation of the old kingdom, the rise of the monsters, the cataclysm. It was caused by this Enderman when they opened a portal to the end of the world. It wanted to dominate our plane, but were thwarted by a brave few left to stand against them. And guessed. I was already tired from the journey, and when the Enderman broke the link, I almost fell to the floor in exhaustion, unable to even muster a whimper. And then I saw why I'd been released. Guest had come. The encounter with me had weakened the other Enderman, but Guest had still had his work cut out. More Enderman visions were bleeding out from the duel I was witnessing, and I saw things I didn't understand. When Guest approached me, he told me to leave the enchanting room. There wasn't much time. Still drained and stunned, I hesitated and watched. That's when the monster went berserk.
I had sensed the departure of the other Enderman, and after a night of even more intense dreams, I went back to my enchanting room. Still somewhat wary as I did. I wouldn't be able to endure another encounter so soon. Guest and Aquazar were waiting for me. Aquazar could only vaguely interpret the language of the Endermen, like one would try and interpret the meaning of a dream. I, on the other hand, was finding communicating with Guest easier than ever before, and finally I could ask, in what felt like plain language, who the other Enderman was. Darkelor, Guest told me, was an Enderman as old as they come. He was responsible for the cataclysm of this world that brought down the civilizations of man that had existed here before, the visions of which I'd already seen. But it broke him. Darkelor is a husk of what he once was, but whatever is left of his mind is determined. He wants to open the portals to the end once again. Doing so would mean calamity for the people of the savannah and beyond. He is weak, and Guest would do what he could to stop him, but we must prepare. Last time, Darkelor used human agents. For now, though, he's likely lost. What does that mean? Endermen do not see the overworld like we do. We are from a different plane. Since the cataclysm, most Endermen wander in a daze, not able to piece the dimensions together. After this encounter, Darkelor is weakened and would be experiencing things in much the same way. Sounds like hell. It is a purgatory. I turned to Aquazar. She didn't know what Guest and I had said. I wanted to hate her for leading Darkelor here, but she was a prisoner after all, even if it was of her own making. I couldn't really blame her for wanting to escape, and she was so remorseful now, I couldn't help but forgive her. So I explained what I understood of the situation. Only I couldn't. I went to speak, but the words didn't come out. I had lost my voice. Aquazar could tell something was wrong.
I don't think that curse will wash out, Wilfmilk.
What do I do? I can't speak. Guest interrupted my panic. I could now see how diminished he was. Guest mustered all his remaining strength. Unite the people of the savannah. And with that, he vanished. I finished the latest chapter of my journal and put it next to the bookshelves where I had my voice stolen by the wretched Darkelor. I hadn't even got to make fun of Aquazar for not knowing how to enchant a shield. In the open air, I tried to speak, sing and shout. Nothing came. The only step I could think to take towards getting my voice back was to follow Guest's instruction. Unite the savannah. My journey here had only just begun.